Welcome to Turning Point USA's proudly hosted 2021 event, the Gen Free Tour. Joining us on stage tonight, Charlie KIRK. We are proud to be here at Missouri State University. Let's get this started. Now, welcoming to the stage, Charlie KIRK.
Hey, everybody. It's great to be in the great state of Missouri. Boy, I can't see how many people are here. My goodness, it's packed. Woo! It's great to be here. Can you guys hear me okay in the back? Is that good? Great. Thanks for coming out tonight. It's nice to be out in person, isn't it? It's phenomenal. And, you know, we're going state by state, and we were in Oklahoma yesterday. It's a great state. Missouri today. Kentucky tomorrow, and we're going to states that are open, that trust their citizens to make good choices, and you have good leaders here, and you've seen from other states how these lockdowns have destroyed the humanity in our country. I have said from the very beginning that these lockdowns will go down as one of the worst mistakes in American history. And if you look at what the lockdowns did to small businesses, to mental health, to alcoholism, drug usage, to social isolation, to young people, for what? Even in the states that lock down heavily, let's look at California, they have worse death rates, worse hospitalization rates than states that are fully open. But it goes to a deeper point that I want to explore with you tonight, which is liberty is very hard. Liberty's not easy. You see, America was founded on this idea of liberty and responsibility. But in order to have liberty, you must have trust of your citizens. Over the last year, we have seen our leaders go towards safetyism over liberty. You see, people want to be taken care of more than they want to be free. And so being here tonight is a statement to the bureaucrats, to the control freaks, to the central planners, that we do want to be free and trust us to make good decisions. You see, freedom not only requires trust, it requires politicians to understand the framework that we're in. See, over the last year, we have seen not just these lockdowns have a historic toll on our freedoms and our liberties, but also we have seen the moving of the goalposts. We have seen young suicides going up like we've never seen before. And we are seeing a deterioration of our humanity with one-size-fits-all government policy intervening at once. So the question is, Charlie, the people say all the time, Charlie, what would you have done instead? Well, I think locking down for the first 2 weeks, the first month, is fine. But the moment that all of a sudden our leaders started lying, like Dr. Anthony Fauci, who should be fired immediately from any position at all in our country, as soon as our leaders started lying about social distancing, masks, children in schools, we should have asked the question, is this about trusting the science, or is this about trusting the scientists that you like? And that's really what it was always about, is that we have a certain political agenda that we are using science as a way to try to put it forward. And look, I want to be very clear. You know, we're going through a gun debate in our country right now, and I'm going to weigh right into it, and I think it's very important that we articulate why we have the Second Amendment. It's not for hunting, it's not for self-defense, it's for something much more important than that. The Second Amendment is the amendment that protects all the other amendments. Without the Second Amendment, there is no First Amendment, there is no Fourth Amendment. An armed citizenry that is able to protect themselves against despots and tyrants is essential to the protection of all the other liberties that we enjoy in our country. And I want to sympathize with some people that wanted to keep the country locked down through the summer and through the fall. The resort towards safetyism, acting as if a politician is going to come in and save you, is very tempting. It's tempting to believe that our leaders can come in and prevent you from something dangerous possibly coming. When in reality, we know that the hierarchy of what government should be is, of course, first the self, recognition of the individual, and your rights come from God, not from government, and we should never lock down our churches again in our country. But also, There's a really important component to this that we don't talk about enough, which is the family. The family is under attack in our country right now. And the family is supposed to go individual, family, village, city. That's the hierarchy of how you're supposed to build a government. Then obviously from there, county, state, federal government. We'll get into that. However, the way that we should have handled this virus is, first and foremost, politicians should have been very clear about the data in real time. And they also should have said, if you want to do something foolish in regards to this virus, you have the right to make dumb choices. There are so many different things that we allow the cost of liberty to exist all the time. A great example is how most of you got here tonight. Automobiles. Over 30,000 people die on the road every single year, driving. That's a lot of people. But no reasonable person runs for office. Well, I guess San Francisco, they do this all the time. But no reasonable person in this part of the world says we should go get rid of cars. Why? Because we know that the liberty of being able to drive with the potential downside of dying in an accident is worth it. The freedom of being able to drive, and we say we're going to trust you to make good choices, and quite often people don't. Now, if we were really serious about saving lives, we'd put national speed limits down to 5 miles an hour, not 60 miles an hour. Now, those of you that came from Little Rock, Arkansas, where are our Arkansas friends, by the way? Anywhere? Right there, awesome. It would have took you 3.5 days to get here. But we say we want the liberty and the convenience to go fast so that you can live more complete and full lives. That's what liberty is about. But again, liberty requires people that don't want to be taken care of, but instead are able to take responsibility for their actions. And this came at a collision point in the last year, which is why I'm so insistent that we must open up our country immediately. And one of the false choices about lockdowns is that you do know that once we reopen the country, you're still allowed to stay at home and wear 2 masks while you shower, right? Like, you don't have to leave your home. And if you believe masks work, then go ahead and wear one. I'm mask agnostic, which is a Greek word, agnosis. I don't know if they work or not. I've seen studies that say they don't. The point is, do not force me to wear a mask. I thought it was my body, my choice. Isn't that what the left always says? And so we have seen states like Missouri handle this a lot better than states like California and New York. I think that their lockdowns were a little bit too severe here for a little bit, but I'm glad to see your state handled it more reasonably than most other states. And if you start to see all of a sudden people from my home state, Illinois, flooding into this state, and are you seeing this a lot? All of a sudden you're seeing a lot of Chicagoans come in. And by the way, we have term limits in Illinois. It's 1 term in office, 1 term in jail, right? It's different than most states. And so now I got to say, Missouri is competing for the corrupt politician thing, but we'll get into that. Not quite. Illinois still, I think, is winning. But I want to talk about this idea of moving from state to state. There's a lot I want to cover tonight. I also want to read parts of the Declaration of Independence because it's so important. We don't teach it to our young people. And when it is taught to you, it's taught completely incorrectly from a biased perspective. And then I obviously want to have some questions, which is always really fun. But I want to talk about this idea of people moving from state to state. And a lot of you are probably thinking about moving to another state, or you've moved to Missouri to seek freedom or to seek liberty. We have seen the greatest movement of people between states in the last year since like the 1860s or 1870s, right after the Civil War. We've never seen this before. 10 million people have changed their residence from New York to Florida, California to Arizona. Our headquarters at Turning Point USA is in Arizona, and it's changing rapidly. And I have a couple rules for people that go from one state to the other. And there's 3 rules. Obviously, I'm not going to put these into government edict, but they're rules that any reasonable, respectful, and responsible person should follow. And I think they're also applicable to how we should craft our immigration policies nationally in our country. And the first rule is this, is that if you moved for a reason. Moving's a big deal. Those of you that have moved before, you don't just move just for fun. Moving, picking up your entire life, is you move for a reason. Identify that reason. So if you've moved from California to Arizona, or if you moved from Illinois to Missouri, why did you move? Well, you probably left Illinois because of high taxes, corruption, highest property taxes, rising crime, lockdowns, and the infringing of your freedoms and liberties. So then don't go from Illinois to Missouri and all of a sudden try to turn Missouri into Illinois. I'm going to talk about this because it's really important. I'm going to talk about why I think it's actually really immoral to try to go to a new state and try to make it in your previous image. It's also so unbelievably foolish. You moved for a reason. Identify that reason, and don't try to create your new state into the wasteland that you fled. And this is happening in Arizona. This is happening in Texas. This is happening in Florida. And if I have to see another governor do a ribbon cutting ceremony in Texas with some tech firm that comes in, like, oh yeah, let's go welcome 3,000 Californians into Chandler, Arizona. What do you think they're going to do? They're going to bring their values with them. They're going to bring their ideas with them. Instead, I'm all for job creation. I'm all for economic development. But I also think that there's such differences in the way that we view the basic American value system. We're gonna build that out tonight of what that actually is, that supersede the profit motive. You see, I think that the conservative movement, this is a little bit of a tangent, I'm gonna talk about this, has been far too focused on profits and not focused enough on patriotism. And I'm going to talk about what that means, because I'm all for profits, I'm all for entrepreneurship, but when all of a sudden you are putting business profits for transnational corporations above the American way of life and the American promise, then you're not a conservative, you're a corporatist. It's a very big difference. Okay, the second rule for when you move state to state, let's say someone from Illinois moves to Missouri, they say, oh yeah, I'm going to change Missouri. I mean, they're all going to eat kale and vegan or whatever they're talking about. Try to get rid of cows because they're somehow destroying the world. Your change is likely worse. Your change that you're going to try to implement in a new state is probably going to make the new state you're going to a worse place to be in. There's a reason why you're moving, remember? And we're seeing this happen in real time. This is why Georgia all of a sudden is different. This is why Arizona's all of a sudden is different. And that's the third rule. And this is something we don't talk about enough, and we have to apply it to national immigration policy, which is you will then, if you do try to change the area that you're in or the state you move to, you're then imposing your views on someone that can't move and didn't move. So for those of you that are second or third generation in this wonderful, beautiful state, where you've made decisions to respect the Second Amendment, you've made decisions to respect a certain way of life, all of a sudden you have people coming in from other states, and you say, wait a second, now am I going to have to move to preserve the Missouri way of life? All of a sudden, you're the ones that are encroaching in other people's lifestyles, saying that I know better than you do. And that, in essence, I believe is immoral, especially when you look at what's happening at the rate of which it's occurring. And it's amazing because if California, New York, and Illinois were such wonderful examples for public policy, they would not be losing population. Instead, the outward migration from these states is so unbelievably telling. And I think all of those rules also apply to our international immigration system. Now, this is something that conservatives need to get very clear about. I called for an immigration moratorium last year as soon as the pandemic hit. If a country does not have a shared language, culture, or history, it's going to stop being a country, and it'll just be a temporary colony where you make a bunch of money and you lose any sense of congruency and any sense of familiarity with your fellow countrymen. So we love free speech in the conservative movement, right? But if you don't share a language with your fellow countrymen, how can you express and share ideas? So we talk about speech, but let's talk about the moral imperative of speech. Why do we like freedom of speech? We like freedom of speech because it's the best way that we can govern ourselves without actually having to get to physical conflict. Dialogue, which comes from the Greek word through reason, through thinking, is what makes us different in the West than almost any other country around the world. Our capacity to say, you know what, debate me. Come up and tell me why your ideas are better. But all of a sudden, if speech is disappearing, which it is in our country, and I'm going to get to that in a second for a different reason as well, then all of a sudden, you're more likely to self-segregate from a certain conversation or shut yourself up. So we talk about censorship a lot in the conservative movement. Do you know what the number one form of censorship is in the country? It's not from Google, it's not from social media, and I'm going to get to that. It's self-censorship. I see that beautiful Trump hat right up there. Maybe you have the courage, maybe not. I know some people, if you're wearing the Trump hat, you might just put it aside before you go in the grocery store. So you don't want to deal with it. Nope, you're okay, you're more courageous than I am. But the point is, how many people, and you don't have to raise your hands, how many people here self-censor your views because you're afraid of losing a job, getting kicked out of fraternity, getting kicked out of a sorority, or having your friends call you the R word? The answer is almost every single person in this room, whether your hands go up or not. That form of self-censorship is such an unbelievably dangerous trend that's happening in our country. And what does that result in? That results in half the country voluntarily saying that they don't even want to care about what we think, that they care nothing more than a power struggle of controlling our entire country. So I want to get into that even further, which is, there's so many things I want to get into, and I'm trying to make every one of these speeches different from yesterday. But I do want to get into this, which is, there are two threats facing the conservative movement right now. And so I grew up in a conservative movement where we were very focused on overreach of government power. And we should be. Abuse of the IRS, abuse of the federal agencies, big government, and socialism being a threat. We should stay focused on that. But I'm here to tell you that there's an equal or greater threat against our value system, against our families, against our way of life. And that is corporations. I don't say this lightly. I will make the argument that certain corporations in our country are more powerful than our own government. That's hard to say. We as conservatives are supposed to be free market people, right? We're supposed to always be on the side of the private entity. But when Google has 92% of all search results, is that a free market? Or is that a monopoly? It's a monopoly. And they have no interest whatsoever in allowing dissenting ideas or discourse. Exhibit A, this last election cycle. And make no mistake, I will continue to talk about this last election as being the most interfered election in American history, and I encourage you to never give up on that. This last election, somehow, Rudy Giuliani came in possession of Hunter Biden's laptop. You remember this story? It's as if it just disappeared. You have a laptop with very questionable material on that, I'll just say that, who's the son of the next president and now the president of the United States. Not one media outlet is interested in covering it, except Fox News and Tucker Carlson, and God bless him for that. Former business partner of Joe Biden, Tony Bobulinski, goes on network television for 1 hour and says that Joe Biden has tangible shares with the Chinese Communist Party, 10% for the big man. He says that on network television. There's emails to prove it from this laptop. And if you said it on any social media network, you would lose your account instantaneously. How many of you have seen tech bias or social media censorship in one way or the other? I mean, the president literally doesn't have a Twitter account. The former president literally doesn't have a Twitter account. These companies have far too much power. So we are conservatives. Why? First of all, we believe two things that the left does not believe. There is a God, and you are not him. And so, we also believe in the laws of nature and nature's God, and we'll get to that. It's very important. We're actually in almost a theological debate in this country, and most conservatives and Republicans refuse to admit that. It doesn't matter your religious belief. We are arguing human nature whether you realize it or not in our country. We have an answer for those things as conservatives. We recognize our rights come from God. So we are worried that the government will shut us up. We're worried that the government will come in and arrest pastors, like they did in the last year, and say you're not allowed to worship your Creator. We should be equally worried when a corporation comes in and says you're not allowed to speak. So we care about natural rights and the preservation of those rights, regardless if it's a bureaucrat from the federal government or a computer programmer from Google. And that second part is usually a no-go zone. And I have to say, your wonderful Senator Josh Hawley does a great job of articulating this. I just want to say, I'm saying this intentionally because I know this is the one thing they're going to cover in all the local papers. Have your senators back. Enough of this cancel culture nonsense. He's a smart man. He loves his country. He needs your help. Stand by him. He's a good man. And he articulates this, that we as conservatives should care about family formation. We should care about natural rights given to us by our Creator, and we seek to preserve those rights regardless of who threatens them. So I have here the Declaration of Independence, and if you're in a education environment that is not teaching the Declaration properly, you're not just missing out, it's a disservice to our country. And I wish our education system did a better job of teaching this, because largely, and I don't know, there's a lot of homeschooling people here, and by the way, we need to double our homeschooling population in the next couple years in our country. I'm a big homeschooling fan. But one of the biggest issues in our country is that we are teaching our children to hate America. And it comes with the slandering of the Founding Fathers, their character, their values, and their intent. And when you read the Declaration of Independence and you really understand why it was written and what it's saying, it's a beautiful document. Now, what is beauty? Do we even teach that in schools anymore? That which is perfected in being. This is a nearly perfect document for what it was trying to do. It has 3 parts in the Declaration. We celebrate it every July 4th. 1776 was a big year for humanity. It was also the year that The Wealth of Nations was written by Adam Smith. It was also the year that Thomas Paine officially published Common Sense. And it culminated in that July 4th moment where they signed what could have been their death certificate. Courageous men pursuing the good of all humanity. Could have been a death certificate, ended up being a birth certificate. What is courage? Doing the right thing when you don't know the result. That's what courage is. We don't have enough courageous leaders right now in Washington. We don't have, people always, well, I'm only going to act if I know how it's going to end. The most courageous generation, the greatest generation, when they stormed Normandy Beach, they did not know if they were going to live to the next morning. That's courage. The Founding Fathers had courage because they didn't know how this was going to end. And it's written in such beautiful prose and form by one of the most brilliant men ever to live, Thomas Jefferson. Now, I encourage all of you to read the original draft of the Declaration. They don't teach this in many schools. Did you know in the original draft of the Declaration, in Thomas Jefferson's own handwriting, there's an entire paragraph where he condemns slavery and blames King George for bringing slaves to the United States? Probably didn't know that about Thomas Jefferson. They say, oh, he's a racist. He was terrible. He's a very complicated person, aren't we all? He was brilliant, fought for the moral good and the abolition of slavery in the Virginia House of Commons, signed a moratorium of new slaves being brought into the United States 20 years after the ratification of the Constitution of the United States as the third American president, and wrote probably what's the most consequential political document in world history, probably second only to the United States Constitution. It starts when in the course of human events. Let's stop there. What does that mean? This document's applicable to all people, all places, all times. He didn't just say, hey, King George, we got a problem here. He's making a big argument. He's saying what's happening right here in America is bigger than just America. This is about how human beings deserve to be governed. That's a really big argument. That's not just saying like you're doing some bad things. He gets to that later in the document, right? He lists all the complaints, but he starts as big as someone can say. He says, it becomes necessary. Wow, necessary. Not just that it becomes optional. He's making the argument, and all the founders that signed on to it, they say, we have no choice if we are going to continue to say we're pursuing a moral good, but to get behind these words. For one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with one another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station, let's stop there, separate and equal, that ends up being the inspiration for a large part of the U.S. Constitution, to which the laws of nature and nature's God. Wow, is that a big statement. What are the laws of nature? Well, all that work that happened in the Enlightenment, Newtonian physics, force equals mass times acceleration, object at rest will stay at rest, the discovery of the laws of gravity, thermodynamics, the second law of thermodynamics, the inevitable law of decay. As a side note, you guys do know that there's the laws of the left too, right? Which is everything they touch ends up being destroyed. So that's the laws of the left. It's true. And they somewhat knew that. I'm half kidding when I say that. And nature's God. You know, God is mentioned 4 times in the Declaration. God the creator, God the lawgiver, God the executor, God the interpreter of the law. Wonder where you get that for the 3 branches of government. Where did they get that from? Straight out of Isaiah. These were Bible-believing men. Don't let your professors tell you otherwise. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. What Thomas Jefferson is doing here is basically saying, King George, you're not in charge. God is. It's the first people to try to peacefully separate from a despotic tyrant and say, we can do this better. Now, the obvious question is, where did they get the courage to do this? Black Robe Regiment, Jonathan Edwards, Whitefield, pastors that were speaking out and arguing the great leap forward that all of you enjoy today, because most of the world would give anything to have the freedom that you have right now. The freedom to speak, the freedom to assemble, the freedom to have firearms, the freedom to start a business, the freedom to own property, all started here in this document, where they put their entire lives on the line. And then he says, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Whoa, that's a very big statement. Where all of a sudden they're saying, no. Every human being using reason knows that men deserve to be free. This is completely obliterating the dictatorial, despotic construct that every single person lived under prior to the American Revolution, with the absence of maybe Athenian democracy for a short term or the Roman Republic, and they screwed that up. That all men are created equal. We'll get to that later. That they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. You guys know this. That among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. John Locke beautifully put that. So what's the significance of this, and how does it apply to us today? Basically, what the Founding Fathers articulated so beautifully, and they fought for it, and they sacrificed for it, and we're on the verge of screwing it up right now, is that we are in charge. The powerful people are only there because of the consent of the governed. They require our permission. That the sovereign is us. It's not Mark Zuckerberg, it's not Larry Page, it's not Jeff Bezos, and it certainly isn't Joe Biden. It comes from us, the people. And one of the main reasons why they hated Donald Trump is for the first time in a long time, you had a voice in this entire process. That this document became alive when Donald Trump ran for office. All of a sudden, this bipartisan uniparty that was governing our country, of these endless and reckless foreign wars, of these poorly crafted trade deals that I'm sure all of you have seen, Missouri, the collateral damage of that, the factories closed, the opioids coming in, the people that are suffering, because all of a sudden we decide to close a manufacturing plant and send it to Wuhan, China, and bring in a bunch of textiles in exchange of stuff that we don't wear, we don't appreciate, and have dollar sell-offs as garage sales, or we get a public storage unit because we have so much garbage that we can't even take it. Meanwhile, our communities are devoid of purpose, our churches are crumbling, and our families are deteriorating. Donald Trump said this bargain is not working for the American people. And then finally, you look at what the Constitution aimed to do, and obviously the Declaration, I make the argument the Declaration and Constitution were far more compatible than most people would make the argument for, is that you have a moral right to be free, and the biggest threat to that is government and or a tyrant that can put in its place. The argument that I'm submitting to you tonight, though, is for a variety of different reasons. It's government and these massive corporations. That the promise of the Declaration, when Thomas Jefferson wrote this to King George, we need to write our own declaration to the tech companies. That when you say our rights are being infringed upon, it's happening slowly from the federal government. We should watch out for it. But what do we have as a check and balance against Amazon, Twitter, Facebook, Google? The answer is next to nothing. So when these God-given rights and liberties are infringed upon, that's when we must, we should break up these companies altogether, but we must say, I don't care about some sort of corporate National Chamber of Commerce agenda. I am going to preserve natural rights and natural freedoms over transnational corporate profits for people that hate us and do not share our values. That's what we must put first. Here's so much I want to get through. Okay. If you're in school, and this is a completely different topic, but it's related. If you're in school right now, you're probably learning critical race theory. I'm not sure if they're teaching that at Missouri State. I'm sure they are. And by the way, I want to use this opportunity to thank our amazing purple shirt volunteers. Thank you guys for all the hard work to put this event together. Critical race theory is taking over our country. I did a whole video on this, and this is the one thing you're not supposed to talk about, so happy to talk about it tonight. Whatever. The death of George Floyd, you've all been lied to. There's a lot more to that story. I'm not saying that Derek Chauvin acted properly or perfectly. In fact, I wouldn't make that argument. But I encourage all of you to watch the video that I published and just look at the facts and the evidence behind it. He was probably dying of a drug overdose before the police ever came in contact with him. He was not racially targeted. There is zero evidence to suggest that whatsoever. George Floyd asked to be put on the ground 7 times and said, I can't breathe, before they even laid hands on him. And putting your knee on the back of someone's neck is actually within the Minneapolis handbook of proper behavior. Did he probably put it too long and he was probably guilty of manslaughter? Let the jury decide that. But all of that extra nuance behind that was never communicated by the most powerful people in the country. Why? Because they wanted to overly racialize what was a tragedy, a death of a person, to try to implement the most bigoted ideology that we have seen since the KKK, which is critical race theory. This is controlling our corporations. This is controlling parts of our military. This is controlling almost every single aspect of human life as we know it. And it's part of what I call the woke industrial complex. Here's the best example. When Coca-Cola brings in Robin DiAngelo, did you see this example the other day? They bring in Robin DiAngelo to teach all their employees that whiteness is a cancer that must be abolished. It's true. That whiteness means to be colonialist, means to be oppressive, and that the problem will never be solved. What a wonderful business model, by the way, right? To go be paid all this money by these corporations, come lecture and say, you got to hire me next year because we're never actually going to solve this problem. I mean, it is the ultimate business model, right? That person will be rich forever. Robin DiAngelo, who wrote the pile of garbage called White Fragility. And not sure if you guys are forced to read that. You should not I guess you could read it for humor or satire. And so these ideas must be confronted. I don't care if you're a liberal here tonight, if you're a Democrat, if you're an honest human being that cares in the decency and the future of America, we must stand in opposition to critical race theory, regardless of your political affiliation. So what is critical race theory? Critical race theory was a fringe ideology that was popularized by Michel Foucault and Jacques Derrida and the postmodernists and Herbert Marcuse in the 1960s and 70s, spread in the 80s, and was introduced seriously in law schools, critical law theory, which basically is this. They're trying to change the way, and as an exercise, intellectual exercise, it's not a completely, I don't want to say bad idea. It's a fair discussion to have. To implement it as public policy is evil and it's immoral. Basically, they were saying you must take into effect people's circumstances, their way of life, before you try and put forward sentencing guidelines. I reject that. I think justice should be blind. That's how it started. Where it is now is it was implemented as critical race theory, which embraces the Marxist struggle of the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat. Proletariat being the working man, bourgeoisie being the owners of the means of production. This is something that Karl Marx and Engels talked about in Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto. And they were wrong about a lot of things. They were right about a couple things. Happy to get into that if anyone's interested. They're completely wrong about the solution to a lot of these problems, but they were somewhat right about that a small group of people have a tendency to control the means of production over time, and happy to break that apart if people are interested. The point is that the Marxists believe that struggle is inevitable. And so the postmodernists and the critical race theorists said, you see, the reason why America has not become Marxist yet is because we've been focusing on economic struggle, not race struggle. And they hit a soft spot, didn't they? They used our best intentions against us. You see, they tried the Occupy Wall Street movement. You remember that? They tried to take over the country by saying we want more stuff and get money away from the rich. It didn't work. Why didn't it work? Because we have a vibrant middle class, and most people say, I'm actually going to keep on working hard, and I think that there's some problems with our system, but I don't want to burn it all down to the ground. Go get a job. Like, that was basically the dismissal of the Occupy Wall Street movement for good reason, right? Then they tried it with the Me Too movement, turning men against women. It didn't work because they tried to slander an innocent man, Brett Kavanaugh, and they failed in public fashion unlike ever before. And people realize there's more nuance to this, which is we shouldn't believe men or believe women. We should believe facts. We should have cross-examination of witnesses and due process. And if there is a scumbag out there, put them in jail forever. But we're not going to redefine our entire society just because of some really angry women activists that have taken over our colleges, right? Like, we're not going to do that. And we should be unafraid to say that. And so, but then they found, and this has been boiling for many years, and they found a sweet spot, which is that no one in this room wants to be called the R word. No one. For good reason. Because that is the mark that will destroy your livelihood, and it's basically a public condemnation, as close to Cersei in Game of Thrones walking through the city as you can imagine. If you guys don't get the reference, fine. If you get it, you know exactly what I mean. That you're a bad person, we're going to destroy your life. No one wants to be called the R word. So then we have entire public dialogue that happens where good-meaning people embrace really bad ideas because they don't want to be called the R word. And then basically it's like, I'm not going to challenge it because they must be right because they call themselves anti-racists. Most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard. They're actually the bigots, by the way. They're the ones that want to classify people based on skin color. And let me be very clear. If you harbor racial resentment against any form of people, you have a lot of work to do. You have a character improvement plan you must go on. You have apologies you must offer. You have repentance you must go through. I encourage you to get back in contact with your Creator through His Son and intermediary, Jesus Christ. I mean that because racism is a sin. It's a real thing, and you should, if that is you. But, and here's the but that people don't say, your mere existence as a white person does not mean that you are a racist. It doesn't. In fact, the categorization of all white people being racist is in itself racist. But that's not what they view as racist. They view racism not as a singular person harboring evil, sinister stereotypes against another person. They view racism as a power struggle. Going back to that postmodernist, critical race theorist, Marxist thing, where they believe that black people cannot be racist and all white people are always racist. That is a sloppy way to view the world. In fact, that's a dangerous, imprecise way to view any sort of thing in our country. And here's the danger in this. We're talking about race way too much in our country. Way too much. They're trying to distract you away from real issues. Like more young people are committing suicide than ever before. Like violent crime is going up. The divorce rate is going up. We have 1 million abortions in our country every single year. All of those things are infinitely more important than some sort of subconscious racial bias training. Like, give me a break. If you cared about black lives, you'd want to end abortion in our country and stop the slaughter of black children in the womb. This is a moment, and a good friend of mine who's an atheist and a liberal, a legitimate liberal, James Lindsay, has spoken out so wonderfully against critical race theory from a liberal perspective. And his perspective is the right one, which is that this ideology is not about progress, it's regressive in nature. It's about having you categorize other people based on things they can't control. That is not the country I want to live in. And that is not the country that we as conservatives want to embrace. And I'll end with this before we go to questions. For all the liberals or Democrats or whatever, the leftists watching on the live stream or here in the audience tonight, let me tell you a story about the French Revolution. Because I know it's tempting if you're on the left to use this moment, this revolution, to get power. That's what they're doing, right? They're trying to seize all of this together. And basically, by the way, if you have a BLM sign in your yard, basically, it's just like, look how good of a person I am. That's basically what they're trying to say, right? Cut it out. The leftists that are trying to seize this virtue signaling moral plateau, look how good of a person I am. Here is a rule that replicates itself all throughout history, that the left will be devoured by the beast of their own creation. The French Revolution happened in the same time period of the American Revolution, right afterwards. It was a different type of revolution, though. It was not one that pursued liberty and freedom. It was more based in revenge and overthrowing an aristocracy. The Jacobins were the ones that were the main thrust behind the French Revolution. Two philosophers in particular were the philosophical underpinnings of the French Revolution, one being Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who a lot of you are probably learning in your philosophy classes right now, who's complete garbage, and then the other one, Montesquieu, a French judge who our founders liked, but they misapplied a lot of his texts. Jean-Jacques Rousseau preferred the primitive over the civilized. He preferred the infant over the adult. He preferred the adulterous lover over the loyally married spouse. He wrote the second best-selling book in the 1800s was his book basically glamorizing the romantic novel of committing adultery. I kid you not. The title escapes me, but he was very big in trying to deconstruct Christian norms. It's actually 1700s, not 1800s. And so the French Revolution starts, and a guy named Robespierre becomes the leader of the French Revolution. He popularized the guillotine, public executions. We must make people known. They were so committed to revolutionary change in the French Revolution, they changed time. I kid you not. They got rid of the 7-day calendar and they went to a 10-day-a-week calendar. They said, we must change everything down to time itself. Now, Robespierre was an outspoken revolutionary. But like all revolutions and beasts you create, things have a tendency not to go well. See, the Jacobins said, that guy has too much power. We don't like him. So they one day staged a coup. They brought him up to the very same guillotine that he created, where he killed the French aristocracy. And they cut Robespierre's head off. And they cheered for 10 minutes, uninterrupted. The beast you create will eventually devour you. So for the leftists and the Democrats and the liberals out there that are tempted to want to engage in this movement, I am warning you right now, they will not stop. This is a movement of chaos and deconstruction. This is not a movement of order and decency and respect and dialogue. It is one that is most similar to the French Revolution. And how did the French Revolution end? When you have all this chaos, then all of a sudden a short guy that wants to declare war on everyone gets to power really quickly. You want a despot to take over? Have everything fall apart, and that's how you get a Napoleon. And that's how Napoleon came to power, is you have that chaos everywhere. You see, the left, they want that dictatorial control. They do. They desire it. We as conservatives are like, no, I want to start a family, have kids, grow my church, improve my community, start a business. For us, political power is just a means to living a better life. For them, political power is everything. And so for the leftists out there that are tempted by critical race theory and this woke industrial complex, I'm warning you, stop it. Come and join the side that is opposing this and trying to say, we want to be a country that cares about character, not skin color, that cares about your soul, not the melanin content in your skin, that cares about who you are, not what you look like. And that is the right side of history. All right, let's get questions. I can see you guys now. All right, wow, it's a packed room. Okay, let's get some questions right here, and let's get to as many possible. So questions, not speeches, and right up here.
Where at?
Raise your hand.
Oh, shoot. Yeah.
Yeah, just form a line, guys, right here. Don't be shy. Cool. Okay.
You have a question?
Okay.
I do now.
All right. Speaking of the mic.
Oh, sorry. Hi, Charlie. Thanks for coming, for one. How do you keep going forward with everything going on right now?
Just me personally?
Like, what really drives you as a person?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I mean, people ask me all the time, am I optimistic or pessimistic? And that's basically, you know what they're really asking when they ask that? Hey, can you give me an excuse to give up? That's what they're saying. You know it's true. You're like, come on, if you say it's bad enough, now I could just go back and try to not be eaten by the beast, right? I refuse to answer that question. I have reasons for optimism. I have reasons for pessimism. The reasons for pessimism is the left controls everything. It's probably pretty pessimistic. Reason for optimism is we're on the right side of history and that we're not giving up and we're still gathering and we're louder than ever before. And we know who these people are. We know that they do not have our best intentions at heart. And let me get to that. How many of you have heard this phrase, we want the same thing, we have different ways of getting there? That was what my political science teacher told me. And I think that's probably fair for some people on the left. It's not the categorization that's accurate of the current leaders of the left in our country. They want a completely different America than what we want. They do not want the same end result. They're perfectly okay with 1 million abortions a year. I'm not. They're perfectly okay with men competing in women's sports. They're okay with a man who thinks he's a woman becoming the Health and Human Secretary, whatever that is, and giving puberty blockers to young children, which is a form of child abuse. She's unafraid to say that. And so that's not what we believe in. Cambridge, Massachusetts comes out today and says that they now recognize legally this phrase called polyamorous marriages. Now, what else is in Cambridge, Massachusetts? Harvard University, exactly. You want to know the dumbest ideas in America come from? It's from Harvard. You know why? Well, I believe that God is the source of all wisdom. Wisdom is the knowledge of all things that are eternal and do not change. There's two types of knowledge. There's practical knowledge and eternal knowledge. Well, there's no God at Harvard, so there's no wisdom. So you have a bunch of really smart people that know a bunch of stuff that are constantly at war with what Thomas Jefferson said is eternal, the laws of nature and nature's God. You see, this is something that our schools do not teach well. Actually, they teach the opposite. They teach you that human nature can be changed. Now let me be clear. Human character and human decisions can be developed over time based on the society and the education systems we have, absolutely. But who we are naturally, our raw material, is unchanged. This is a biblical view of the world. It's original sin, that we're broken by nature. You see, the Rousseauians, the Marxists, the far left, they don't have that view. Their view is that human beings are naturally good. We believe that human beings are basically bad. Now, the best example of this is when any of you that have children or have dealt with young children, if young children are naturally good, why do you have to teach them goodness? If they're naturally good, did you teach them to manipulate one parent against another, or did they know that naturally? Now, of course, they're a byproduct of somewhat of their circumstances, of their environment. But only Americans can believe that human beings are naturally good. You know why? Because in America, people are actually pretty decent to each other. You travel the rest of the world, you'll have a completely different perspective. Human beings in our state of nature are in need of character development, they're in need of parents, they're in need of the family structure, and we're losing that very quickly in our country. So to answer the question, how do I keep going? I have no choice. I don't care if we're going to lose or win. I'm committed to the optimistic belief that we are going to win, because that's the moral good that we have to hold on to, that victory is within sights. They want us to give up. They want us to believe that we're never going to win again. But we must be of good cheer. And let me say one last thing on this. Do you notice how angry these people are? They control everything. I've never seen winners be so angry. We're the losers, and we're happier than ever. That goes to show you who's on the right side. Thank you. And by the way, if you disagree, feel free to cut it in line. I'm happy to, yeah, cool, okay, yes.
Hi, Charlie. Thank you for taking my question. You talked a lot about race today. And I'm just curious how a man whose organization hosts a Black Leadership Summit, a Young Latino Leadership Summit, a Young Jewish Leadership Summit, how can he be a misogynistic white supremacist? I just don't see the math. And I've been wondering this a while. I'm wondering if you figured it out yet or not.
No, so what yeah, I sympathize with what you're being sarcastic, obviously, right? So that's what they try to throw at me. And let me be very clear that there are different cultures in our country. Of course there are. There's Black culture, there's Latino culture, and all of whom, especially Black culture's contribution to our country, is rich and beautiful in many different ways, in art and in scholarship. What I reject, though, is the hyper-racialization of every single human being. And so we would be a fool not to recognize cultural differences, right? Those obviously exist. What they're going after is something way different and deeper, which is that your melanin content, by definition, makes you a certain way, and we must categorize you based on that way. So I appreciate the lighthearted, sarcastic question. I haven't been able to figure that out either. God bless you, man. Thank you.
I'm actually more libertarian in my views, so I agree with most things. When it comes to the topic of abortion, I'm agnostic, so I might look at life a little bit differently than you. I agree if you do the deed, that you should have to suffer the consequences. I give you that. And I've seen Ben Shapiro dismiss the people that have been raped and didn't have a choice in that. So how would abortion look to you as law for those kind of people? If you want to get rid of all of it, if there's a rapist, how likely are they to be convicted? And there's a time limit.
Just so I know where you're coming from, when does life begin?
At birth, when there's a heartbeat, yes.
Okay, heartbeat. So you
Yes.
said birth
It
and
is-
heartbeat.
it
Those
is
are
a
two different
baby.
things. So
Yes, it
heartbeat
is
can
a
be as
baby.
early as 3 weeks to 6 weeks. Birth is 9 months. So which is
Right.
it?
I'm saying when there's a heartbeat, which is usually when you can tell
Okay,
you're pregnant.
so
yes.
why heartbeat?
Because that's when. Well, okay, that's fair. Because if you see other forms of life, so basically at conception, then I can.
Okay,
give you
cool,
that.
got it. All right,
I can give you that.
Good. Thank you. We agree.
Yeah.
So let's go from there. And it's a well-intentioned question, so we're going to work through this together, right?
Okay, yeah.
Is human life that can't defend itself worthy of protection?
If it is not dependent on another life.
Got it. So should we get rid of every mentally handicapped person in the country that's dependent on a caregiver?
Not if there are people that are willing to take care of them.
Okay, so it's dependent then on the willingness of the host.
Correct.
Okay, so the morality of the human being is based on whether or not the host wants that person or not.
Correct.
So the mentally handicapped person that's left on the side of the street should be left to die because their parents no longer want to take care of them.
No, because there's people willing to take care of them that are not
There are millions
their
of people that want to
parents.
adopt babies right now,
That's what I'm saying. There are people willing to.
right?
And I agree with that, but the people that didn't have the choice whenever they conceived, that don't want that, that life depends on that body to survive. That body does not want that.
Got it. So how many sets of DNA are present when a woman is pregnant?
Oh, I guess I don't know.
So do you have a moral right to choose the future of another person's DNA?
If I am the host of that body, yes.
Got it. So what percentage is that baby, the mother's or the father's?
Well, if it was a rapist, then it's the mother's. The father should have no choice in that.
Okay. So your moral argument, I'm not saying it's not an easy
Yeah.
thing to say, but here's my perspective.
Okay.
Life of the mother, that is a very rare instance in case, right? Very rare. Rape is also extraordinarily rare when it comes to abortions in our country. It's less than 1%. It's less than 1%
But
of...
it does happen, and
Very-
they are important.
Yes, very rare. And I have met some amazing adults and amazing people that were survivors and were babies that were born conceived out of a sin. How does doing a wrong after a wrong equal a right?
And I know some people who have been raped, and they are important too.
I agree with you, totally. But also, a termination of a life because of a crime, in my opinion, is not a justified reason to terminate that life.
So you would force every person to have a baby. Is that your stance?
I would grant life to a child that otherwise would not have it. But here's my question. Let's take a step back. Would you agree that abortion is wrong in every circumstance except rape?
Correct.
Okay, so you agree that 99.7% of all abortions should be outlawed. So we agree on that. The problem with this, if I can...
There's a difference between law and morality. Morality,
Oh, no,
they're
there
not
isn't.
correct.
Okay, so should we have murder laws?
No, there is.
Should we have murder laws?
Yes, we should have
Why?
murder laws. Because they're important
Is
for
it
how
wrong,
we live
is
as
it
a
wrong to
society.
take a life?
Yes.
So laws and morality are tied together, right?
To a degree.
When does that degree stop?
When there's a gray area such as rape.
Okay, I believe in absolute truth and absolutes.
I guess that's where we differ.
Rape is not something I trivialize. Let me be very clear. I think rapists should get life in prison and get castrated, okay? Let me be very clear,
Yeah.
okay? With that being said, I believe firmly that life begins at conception. We agreed,
Okay.
right? No, I just want to say that. I'm just telling you my point. And for the sake of everyone else here, I'm going to walk through it. That it's not your DNA, it's not your choice. And every single life, as soon as that DNA is formed, with the only extraordinarily rare exception, when the mother's life is put in jeopardy, which again is so unbelievably rare, it's a couple dozen cases nationwide every single year, is worthy at a chance of being able to live. And here's why. If you go through the acronym, SLED, size, level of dependency, environment, and degree of dependency, or level of development, I should say, we do not have a moral argument to ever kill someone who's smaller than us, right? I'm 6'4". If I all of a sudden said everyone who's 5'2" should go away, you'd say you're nuts, right? Level of dependency. A baby is born, that baby is dependent on the mother for the first 18 months. Cannot feed itself, can't think, it's wholly dependent, right? Environment, doesn't matter where you are, right? You should always have your constitutional rights protected. And then finally, the degree of development or how dependent you are on the mother. I will say this, I think you're coming at this from a good place. And I don't come to this conclusion lightly, and I do not trivialize the crime or the sin. But I struggled with this for a while, and I came to a place where I said, I am not going to justify a wrong act to try to fix a wrong act. Instead, I believe that love, compassion, the protection of that human life, even if it was conceived through a sin, is someone that is worthy of constitutional protection. I want to thank you for your courage for being here tonight, and I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
I'm honestly really starstruck to meet you, Charlie.
Oh,
I've
thank
been
you.
watching your videos since I've been junior in high school. Actually, my high school teacher showed me your videos. My question for you is, recently your colleague Candace Owens has came under fire by Cardi B, you know, whatever you want to call it.
By the way, can we give it up for Candace Owens? She does a great job. doesn't she?
So basically, my question for you is we're talking about this cancel culture, but where do we go and cancel Cardi B for the wrong things that she says, and we're going to look up to her, you know, in a positive manner when she's attacking somebody with good moral beliefs and somebody that's a strong, independent activist and leader, when Cardi B is excuse my language here, but a former stripper.
Well, not only that, she drugged people and
Yes,
stole
and
stuff from
raped
them. I mean,
our,
she did. No, she's
yeah,
a criminal.
all that
I mean, I'm not
stuff.
making this up. She's not a good person.
No.
And she's not very smart. And I don't say that lightly. Her tweets, you're like hieroglyphics. You need to bring in an interpreter. Like, what is this, right? So look, sorry, you had other comments on top of that? Or
I was just saying, like, where do we get off on, you know, putting our trust into Cardi B versus Candace Owens? Like, I don't get it.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Candace is a threat to them. Cardi is perfect for the left. She makes sexual openness more likely, which of course is part of their entire agenda to deconstruct Western civilization. Candace talks about getting married, having children. She talks about getting a job, not blaming other people for your problems. Cardi B doesn't do any of those things. So Candace is a threat to them. And I just find this so amazing that in 1 week, we get rid of Dr. Seuss and Mr. Potato Head, and then on network television, we have that X-rated display of Cardi B. And so then some people say, well, Charlie, you're engaging in cancel culture against Cardi B, which is a hilarious reversal of something we complain about. And my response to that is, wait a second, this is network television. By definition, you have cancel culture for certain things, right? You don't allow swearing, you don't allow indecency. That's the whole idea of network television. Now, why were those laws put in place for the first place? Well, for the protection of the innocent, the protection of our children. They've never been interested in the protection of our children. So I have a great example of this, and it goes back to where we find right and wrong, which is if you do not believe in a God, right and wrong is merely an opinion. And I will go toe-to-toe with anyone on this, and sometimes it gets into a circular argument. Sometimes it's really fun. The point is this, and here's a great example of this, and it kind of ties with Cardi B. San Francisco, a couple years ago, was very close to allowing public nudity. Very close. In fact, I think they might have passed it. But it was really interesting, and Dennis Prager did a whole show on this, and he's just so phenomenal. He's such a brilliant mind. Now, it actually failed in the San Francisco City Hall. Why? No one in the San Francisco City Hall made the argument that it was wrong. No, they said it was unsanitary. So why not? Why not allow people? So then someone said, okay, well then we'll provide towels to all the nudists. You see, for us that believe in the protection of the innocent, the development of young people, the biblical construct of what sexuality is supposed to be, of course, we have a reason for why that's wrong. But for the San Francisco secularists, they say, oh, no, it's unsanitary. It's going to be bad for spreading communicable diseases. And so if you do not have an arbiter of what is right and wrong, that's where it leads you. Cardi B is perfect for that. She's an agent of chaos, and a foolish one at that. She is trying to desensitize young people to not care about monogamous, loyal relationships, instead to try to play into this garbage of hookup culture, whatever that is, and all that nonsense. And so that's why Candace Owens is a threat. And so I love watching that back and forth. First of all, it's completely unfair, right? It's like Muhammad Ali boxing up against a high school student, right? It's just completely unfair, right? And it's so important for our cultural conversation because you know it's the one thing Cardi B can't call Candace? She can't call her a racist. She actually has, but it's hilarious. And that one exchange that you've all seen has made millions of people view politics differently. So your accurate observation on cultural trends, I appreciate. And I think all of us need to speak out louder and say, wait a second, we get rid of Dr. Seuss and we allow Cardi B. Something's gone wrong in our country, and most Americans are with us. Thank you for your question. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So given the fact that gun control has come up in the conversation again for politics, this is a question relating to that. So in a letter to James Madison back in 1778, a captain of a trade ship asked for clarification on the Second Amendment, and he asked if he could arm his ship with cannons to protect himself from pirates. And Madison was like, yeah, go right ahead. So given that cannons are at least, they would at least equate to like a bazooka in nowadays terms, where, if anywhere, do you draw the line on what citizens are allowed to have by the Second Amendment?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I am not libertarian on a lot of things. I'm very libertarian on firearm ownership, very. And I think the libertarians are totally wrong on trade and immigration. But I tend to trust citizens to make good choices. And so, for example, the 1986 ban on certain firearms, I would get rid of it. That's one example. I think it's the automatic ban. I generally go on the side of liberty in this case. And there's a cost to that, of course. I'd have to look further into that quote that you mentioned, but I think that most gun laws in our country are way too cumbersome and way too restrictive, especially in cities like Chicago, where they have almost a handgun ban, and still 727 people were shot and killed last year in Chicago. Here's the essence of it, though. I'm not going to give you a specific policy answer because I haven't done that much thought on it, but I think they're too cumbersome and too restrictive in most states. And here's where they're going after it, if I may. They're going after your ammo. They're not going after your guns, okay? Listen to me carefully, everybody. They're going after your ammo. They know that there's a constitutional right to firearm ownership because of DC versus Heller in 2008. There's no constitutional right to ammo ownership. So the smart people on the left are trying to go towards ammo registration and ammo regulation, right? So that's a really important thing that you guys must pay attention to if you care about firearm ownership. And if you're watching this closely, there is an ammo shortage in this country unlike anything we've ever seen before. There's massive back orders, and ammo prices are going up dramatically. And so I just want to contribute that to the conversation because we need to have a more holistic view of it. In fact, Virginia just recently arrested someone because they didn't have their ammo properly registered. Not that their gun was not properly registered. So I hope that I answered the spirit of your question. I'm not going to get too far into the details or specifics, but I tend to stay on the side of I trust people to own firearms.
And if you did want to look it up, I think the captain's name is William Bradford. It's
okay.
So
I will. Thank you for being here. Thanks. That was a great question. Thanks.
Hi, Charlie.
Hi. Thanks for being here.
Right. So I just want to start us off by my high school has been recently going through there's a group at my high school that is seeking to overturn a Native American mascot at our school. And so basically my question to you is like what is like the best or the most logical arguments like in favor of the preservation of Native American mascots in schools and colleges?
So if I can ask you, what is the mascot? Is
we're the Chiefs.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Got it. Okay. So, yeah. So this is what I can't quite understand is that, first of all, when you poll indigenous people, they are very much on the side of not removing these mascots. That's a very good point. Every public poll shows that they don't want these mascots actually pulled or removed. Number two, this kind of goes to a broader point of cultural appropriation, right? Which I always get a chuckle out of this. And if Media Matters is going to write this up, Dennis Prager made this point first, okay? So go blame him, okay? Shouldn't we be happy for cultural appropriation? Shouldn't we be happy that people want to embrace other cultures? So let me just say one other thing, and I'd love to.
I mean, the cultural appropriation, that's like this group's main argument in favor of changing the mascot.
So my argument's the opposite, which is we're celebrating the tradition of Native Americans in our country enough that we want to wear it on every jersey and every T-shirt, that we respect our Native American heritage in our country, not the opposite of it, right? And their perspective, which, and just to give you a little bit of help where they're coming from, they believe, and this is wrong, that white nationalist supremacists are using that as like, oh, we conquered you and now we're going to wear you as some sort of like token. No, that's actually their argument, right? That we like wear these like their merit badges, like all the different land that we conquered, as if you being a 14 or 15-year-old, that's the reason you want to. It's a fallacious, illogical argument. And I would hold the line on this because I'm a big believer that these names were given for a reason. Indigenous people in our country are supportive of those names staying there, and it's a good thing. if we're doing it in good faith to remember our history, appreciate it, and celebrate it, insofar that it's not done in a bad spirit or for a bad intent. So I hope that's somewhat helpful for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for taking my question, and thank you for being here and doing everything for us. I've been watching you election night and everything. I'm a nurse in a local facility, and you know, I've been watching a lot of stuff, paying attention to things, and I mean, as we all know, we saw Joe Biden. We saw him trip 3 times up Air Force One. And one of the first questions we ask on our admission assessment is, have you fell in the last 3 months? And the next question is, how many have you fell 1 to 3 times in the last 3 months? I mean, seriously, as a nurse watching him, he is not there. When is this chaos? Like, when are we going to get our country back?
First of all, he's the first person to fall upstairs. Have you ever seen that before?
Yes. And he said that the stairs were slippery. Well, I watched the
Falls
video
up the
feed.
stairs. It's a
I watched the
remarkable
video
thing.
feed today from Dan. His name escapes me, but I believe his name is Dan Scavino.
Okay.
He showed the picture side by side of what happens whenever it's slippery and it's wet and the weather is dangerous. They actually lift a ramp that is lower so they don't have this issue, and they showed the side by side because the media is obviously protecting him. If it was so slippery and if it was so windy, why didn't they have it down below?
Look, you're far too logical for all these people, right? You're like way too in the rush. You're like way too logical.
I mean, we're going to get bombed or something.
Look, let me comment on this because you actually strike a really important point here, which is, number one, the way they treated Donald Trump was so unbelievably reprehensible for our country. He walked slowly down a ramp at West Point and took a sip of water, and there was a national conversation about his mental deterioration and his physical well-being, kind of crumbling. And so this idea that we can't talk about, and there's no coverage whatsoever, of someone literally falling up the stairs 3 times is pretty remarkable. I think that he needs Life Alert. You guys ever see that
the same thing.
advertisement? Which is
I said
help
the same
I've fallen and I can't get up. Like, I think that's Joe Biden. And look, let me be very clear. I do not trivialize the aging process. We should care for our elders.
Right.
We should. I don't say that lightly. Also, but he's in a very intense, pressure-filled situation, and he's being taken advantage of. This is the deeper point, okay?
Totally
And
agree.
I've dealt with family members, I've dealt with friends, and I've dealt with relatives that have been in those compromised positions where they're slipping a little bit. Those people should not be in charge of high-pressure situations. And so that's the deeper point, right? I mean, we can have a little bit of fun here and there, and we should, because they were so nasty to Donald Trump that we're not going to forget that with how awful they were, and that we're going to have a little bit of lighthearted, feedback there. And I would feel bad for him if he wasn't trying to destroy our country every single day.
Exactly. That's
Let me
what
just
breaks
very
my
clear.
heart. So what do we do?
So, well, I mean, we have elections, right? And so
That don't make any difference
Well,
whenever we get ballot dumps at 3 a.m.
right. So that you bring up a good point, and we're going to talk about that. So we can talk about that. So, love your spirit, right? We're going to channel it to the right thing, right? No, it's good spirit, right? It's good spirit. So yes. So what do? They want you to give up. That's what you're not going to give up, right? So you're already committing to the first thing. Let me tell you, can I talk about the election thing? Because you brought it up, okay? We got to fix the way we do elections in this country. We got to fix the way we do elections, right? I cannot. So everyone here loves to win. I hate to lose more. I hate it. And especially when there was all this shenanigans and nonsense and all this stuff. So now we must make it our daily mission to put pressure on our lawmakers in Arizona and Georgia. First, we still don't know exactly what happened, okay? There's still a lot of ambiguity. Let me tell you what we do know what happened, though. $400 million was spent from tech oligarchs privately into our public elections, $400 million to an organization called the Center for Technology and Civic Life. We know that happened. We know that the tech companies prevented the spread of information all across the country. We know that happened. We know Georgia went from 248,000 mail-in ballots to 1.2 million mail-in ballots with a signature consent decree that was signed with Stacey Abrams' insistence with Brian Kemp and Brad Raffensperger. We know that happened. And we know when you allow lesser signature standards and more mail-in ballots, you're going to get more nonsense. And with that went the entire direction of the U.S. Senate. What we still need to find out is the extent and the depth. There's speculation behind it, and I am willing to make an argument that there's so much there that's not being reported on. So that's where we must stay on this. And that's why I do podcasts on this. You guys might listen to our podcast. We have been on this more than almost any other podcast. And it's the drumbeat, because we're going to get to the bottom of this, and then our legislators have to reform the way we do elections. Mail-in voting should be for certain people for a certain reason. It should never become universal in our country. Mail-in voting should never become universal in our country. Also, we need voter ID, and so they say voter ID is racist. I think you guys went through a whole fight on voter ID being racist in this state. So let me prove to you that the left does not even believe that voter ID is racist. Can I prove it to you? Yeah. So how many of you heard about this ridiculous idea for reparations in our country? Yeah. So how are you supposed to prove that you were an ancestor of slaves? So you prove the paperwork that 6 generations ago you're a descendant of a slave, but you can't get a photo ID to go vote? Yeah. Like, something here doesn't exactly add up. So it's either you're pro-paperwork or anti-paperwork, right? And it seems as if the left is completely contradictory there. But here's what we need more than anything else, is we need to get away from these long counting periods of counting votes. We need to know who won election night. That will put everything in a shorter and more controlled environment. When you extend the period of time, you allow more external influences to pop their heads up and do things that are immoral, maybe they're illegal, and that's why the states that had their results immediately, Donald Trump won by 400,000 votes in Florida, right? Florida used to be a battleground state, and yet Donald Trump wins it by 400,000 votes. So we must compress the time, we must professionalize our elections, limit mail-in voting. I hope we get voter ID. That's a tougher one because, whatever, Republicans don't want to do that one. Those other ones can be passed. Georgia's moving in that direction. We got to get Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan as well. And there's lots of lawsuits happening. So don't lose faith and don't lose focus. But can I give you one piece of advice? Yes. Don't become cynical. All right? Stay optimistic and say, we're going to fix it. What makes Americans different than the French? We solve problems. They complain about them. We are going to solve this problem. Thank you.
Good evening, Charlie. You know, most conservatives will condemn illegal immigration. They'll advocate for building the border wall, enforcing the immigration laws we currently have. However, something that most conservatives won't address are the harmful impacts of mass legal immigration. Over the past year, we've seen millions of Americans be displaced from their jobs due to COVID. And in this past March, you stated on a podcast that America could take over 50 million immigrants over a span of 10 years. Now, as we've seen what COVID has done to this country, would you support instituting a immigration moratorium that would extend past COVID to help give time for Americans to re-earn those jobs and address some of the problems that have been sprouting up here in the heartland?
Yes, and just so did you hear my speech?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so I did say I was for a permanent immigration moratorium, just so we're clear, right? I supported it last March, 2 weeks before the president. The virus has ravaged communities. It makes no sense to allow foreign workers to continue to disenfranchise our workers. And your question is exactly right. Your question is that it's both legal and illegal immigration. How many of you right now are in college worried about a job? Maybe when you graduate. You should come first. Our priority should be to our fellow countrymen, the people that paid taxes and really played by the rules. And it shouldn't be to foreign workers or to foreign nationals. That's what government is supposed to do. And so I just want to correct you a little bit, because I have been very firm in public on an immigration moratorium. And that's because I care about the fellow workers in our country. I care about strong families. And I believe those of you that go borrow $30,000 to go get an engineering degree, you should get the jobs first until we reach full employment. And you know what? Even then, I think that there's other aspects, non-economic, we have to talk about, which is culture and language and immersion and being able to bring in this mass volume of people. And so one of the main reasons why this keeps happening is because there's a bipartisan uniparty in our country that wants to keep the borders open for 2 different reasons, right? Votes and lower wages, right? And so the Chamber of Commerce and the Democrat Party are able to agree on that. And so I want to thank you for that question, just tweak it a little bit, but also say that we must put pressure on our elected officials to put our college graduates first. Because here's what happens. You have these tech companies that I'm railing against. They go dish out these H-1B visas, right? And H-1B visas are like a form of indentured servitude. You're not even allowed to leave those firms. So what happens? They lower the wages because they don't want to hire American workers. You know, one of the biggest lies is that there's jobs that Americans don't want to do. It's a lie. Especially when we have young, aspirational graduates like you guys, and you say, okay, there's a job I'll do, but can you at least pay me a fair wage because I have to go service a $40,000 debt? So that's what our immigration policy should be in this country. Serving our fellow countrymen, especially after the pandemic, especially after all of this. So I want to thank you for the spirit of your question, and we must always put our country first. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I believe Nancy when she says that the law applies to everybody, and I believe it's illegal to harbor illegal aliens or assist illegal aliens. What do you think about impeach 46?
Yeah, I mean, we have to have the House first, right? I mean, so now that we just impeach people for whatever reason, I mean, my goodness, is there more than enough reason? Yeah, I mean, sure, we have to win back the House and then win back the Senate. But your broader point is we should keep the pressure on the Biden administration. We should have hearings. We should be doing all these sorts of things. That's what they did to all of us the last couple of years. And not to mention, they have a lot of explaining to do when it comes to the Chinese Communist Party. A lot of explanation. And the Biden family and the way that they're catering to the Chinese Communist Party is unbelievable, and we have to keep the pressure on that. So the biggest point that you just made is we're not going to get along with the Biden administration anytime soon. They declared full-out resistance on Donald Trump from day one. Joe Biden gives this long speech about unity and bringing people together. I'm still waiting for that unity, aren't you? He's passing $1.9 trillion bills without one Republican vote. Mitch McConnell went on television yesterday, and he said he has not talked to the president once since he got sworn into office. You can say whatever you want about Donald Trump. He was the most accessible, communicative president. He would call Nancy Pelosi all the time. He was always trying to make a deal for you guys, the American people. Joe Biden doesn't care about making a deal for you. He cares about power, if he cares about anything, because I think he's so unbelievably confused and being manipulated by Machiavellian, sinister, influences in our country. So I appreciate the essence and the spirit of the question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Charlie.
How you doing?
Good. So I just have a simple question that could be a complicated answer. Are rising gas prices and building materials the result of the Biden administration? And how do these rising prices affect Americans' confidence in the market?
So the short answer is yes. So why are oil prices going up? It's because they're restricting further oil and gas exploration and the transportation of that oil and gas. Also, there's demand going up. So what happened last year is we shut down our entire economy. Any of you that know oil and gas, it's a highly leveraged economic venture to be in. So a lot of oil and gas companies went under because they couldn't service the debt because oil was at like $18, $19 a barrel, right? And so then you have less people actually exploring and developing oil. Then supply goes back up again, right? Demand goes up right again and supply stays down. So now it goes up. And so Donald Trump was able to celebrate low gas prices, which is a middle-class tax cut for all of you, by the way. You guys see how it's going up right now? Now, Joe Biden has a plan here when it comes to energy, and I'm going to tell you what it is, and it's not good, which is Donald Trump wanted more supply, more exploration, more using of our American assets for our country and for the American worker. Joe Biden is temporarily going to allow to get gas go way up. Now, that helps foreign enemies of our country. So, Joe Biden's all like, oh, Russia's the worst thing ever. You want to crush Russia? Go back to $17 oil. Allow fracking, allow exploration, allow drilling, and allow the Keystone XL pipeline. Of course, he doesn't want any of those sorts of things. He wants, though, more than anything else, he wants no more exploration at all of fossil fuels and oil and gas. He wants to go to a complete solar, wind, renewable grid altogether and basically destroying millions of jobs. And there's so many reasons why that's actually bad for the environment and bad for humanity. And then the second thing about housing prices, or not housing prices, but housing materials, that's also because of the environmentalists. It's also because of incredible demand for housing supplies all across the country in some of the upper middle class areas in America. And it's more expensive than ever to build a home in our country. So how do you bring down prices? You bring down prices through competition, and you bring down prices by increasing the supply. Joe Biden is making it nearly impossible on both of those things. And so the one that I'm really focused on is the gas prices, though. You guys are going to probably see $5 or $6 a gallon gas by summer. And it's going to happen. And it's because he wants to break the back of American energy in our country. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Charlie. I helped start, and I'm the vice president of the first Turning Point chapter
Awesome.
at my high school. And so my question is, see, we've seen so many countries in recent years start turning to socialism and socialist policies, and they completely deteriorated a lot in a lot of the cases. So do you ever truly see America turning towards socialism, and what can we do as Gen Z and as teenagers to stop that?
It's hard to say. Yeah, so we eventually could get to socialism. I think that's something we have to worry about first, is something I touched on in my remarks, is this closer to fascist corporate dominance of our country where we're ruled by 10 companies. And we're seeing that happen really quick. The wealthiest people in our country are $600 billion wealthier today than they were before the pandemic. We have less small businesses than ever before. We have less business startups than ever before. So what I'm really fearful of is almost a corporatist agenda that's okay with all this woke nonsense as long as they're maximizing their profits. Now that very well could lead to a socialist type takeover. So one thing that the corporations don't realize and the National Chamber of Commerce doesn't realize is that they are doing deals with people that actually hate their value system and hate that they exist altogether. So let me tell you what's really happening. Jeff Bezos is worth $160 billion. If Bernie Sanders were to have his way, he will nationalize all the services that Amazon is doing. That is not a good idea. But Bernie Sanders complaining about Amazon is a perfectly legitimate complaint. The point is that we are making socialism an easier sell to the American people because of how powerful these companies have become. So I think before we have socialism, we're going to have this intermediary of this corporate dominance of every single portion of American life. And that's not what we as conservatives should advocate for. Remember, we like markets. Why? Because they benefit humanity. When humanity starts to all of a sudden be under the pressure and under the tyranny of some of these corporations, we should say, hey, what tools do we have at our disposal, given to us legally by the consent of the governed, to allow more competition, small businesses, and push back against these sort of companies? And you guys want to know where Joe Biden got most of his money from? The massive transnational corporations. You guys want to know who's doing his bidding? The massive transnational corporations. And so I am fearful of that in the first step before a complete and total socialist takeover. But if we don't push back against that Chamber of Commerce, open border, China trade, endless war agenda, then we are going to get a legitimate socialist revolution in this country, unlike anything our country has ever seen before. Now, let me tell you what the socialists are doing wrong, that if they fix, we're screwed. I don't know if I should say this. We talk about this a lot, but I might as well. The socialists are doing something really dumb. They're the first socialist revolution ever that espouses to hate the country they're trying to take over. Think about that. Have you ever seen that before? I mean, the Chinese Revolution, they were always pro-China. The Russian Revolution, they were pro-Russian. And so they said that communism was the best thing for Russia. This socialist revolution, whatever it is, they're trying to take over the country saying we actually hate the country, now give us power. If the socialists got smart and they were pro-American socialists, that's a really big problem. So their biggest vulnerability is on the woke industrial kind of cultural issues on that. So how do we defeat socialism in this country? We should debunk it and debate it. But more than anything else, we must offer alternatives. And we must offer specifics of the America we want to live in. This is something Republicans are awful at. You know what Republicans are trying to do right now? Pass an amnesty bill right now in Washington, D.C. Senator Rick Scott is trying to do that. And they introduced a bill to repeal the estate tax. Now, fine, get rid of the estate tax. It hurts farmers. Is that the number one priority of what Republicans should be caring about? No. Republicans should be very clear that we want our children to love our country again. We want church attendance to go up. We want divorce rates to go down. We want drug overdoses to go down. We want civil liberty protections to be made permanent. We don't want our weapons taken away. We want to be able to speak freely on social media. Those are the concerns of the 70 and 80% of the country, not repealing the estate tax or some sort of amnesty deal. The way we defeat socialism is we have tangible, specific policy items that can excite the American people that say, you know what, yes, I want an America that has flourishing families, that make young families want to have more children, not less children. That puts the local coffee shop above the local Starbucks. That puts the local convenience store over the local Walmart. That's what the conservative movement should care about. That wants to put more investment in Springfield, Missouri, and less investment in the Kandahar Valley in Afghanistan, where we have this 20-year war that we keep on sending our people, our amazing heroes, to go die for what reason, no one can ever tell you. These endless wars must end. That's what the conservative movement should stand for, and that's how we're going to defeat socialism in our country. Thank you.
Hi, Charlie. So first, I want to congratulate you on your engagement.
Thank you.
It's kind of old news.
Erica's right here.
Oh.
We're getting married May 8th. We're very excited. So
Probably seems like light years ago with everything going on in our world. But with that in mind, I want to know if you think that government should be involved in the marriage business.
in the marriage business. So yeah, look, if it was presented right in front of me, I just did a whole interview on this of what I believe marriage is. Marriage is between one man and one woman. Let me be very clear. That is what marriage is. And we lost that debate because we allowed a lie that we said that marriage is only about love. Marriage is about a lot of things, but it's not just about love. So you have these big signs, love is love. Well, now you have the resolution in Cambridge, Massachusetts that says that polyamorous marriages are now recognized by the government. So where does marriage come from? Well, first of all, marriage has always been and should always be a covenant of and by the church. Government's intrusion into that is a rather new development to try and change that. Do I think it's realistic, though? Probably not. I don't think that in my generation or the next generation we're going to see any sort of movement there. I will say this, though. It's more popular than I think people think, traditional marriage, and here's why. This was never voted on by the people of our country. I think Missouri might be one of the states, I could be wrong, that passed the traditional marriage referendum that was overturned by the Supreme Court of the United States, if I'm not mistaken. And that is right. And so you guys never had a chance to actually vote on it, and then all of a sudden, it just got from a top-down fiat. And it got wrongly framed as an issue that is more about, that is less about what marriage is supposed to be, which is about the raising of children and a covenant before your Creator, and more about that this idea that, well, love is love. And let me be very clear. You know, Turning Point USA, we have people, and we have really good friends like Dave Rubin and people that are in the movement like Rick Grinnell, who's incredibly courageous, who are openly gay. And I think those people should have a place in the conservative movement. I do not believe in a conservative movement that focuses primarily on just subtraction and division. But you asked me what I think marriage is. And with that previous statement, I will say, I will always believe that marriage is between one man and one woman and a covenant before our Creator. I will never waver on that. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello. Thanks for taking my question, Charlie.
I'm sorry?
I said thanks for taking my question.
Yeah, of course.
So I think a lot of this, I might speak for everyone here, or a lot of people here, but so many around us, like people our age, they just don't care about politics, you know, right or left. They don't care about politics. They don't care about anything. You know, it seems like a lot of people, adults included sometimes, are preoccupied with, you know, TikTok, Netflix, what their favorite food is that they're going to make or, buy, or DoorDash, whatever. How do we convince people that, the liberal agenda that you've talked about, that the degradation of culture that you've talked about, how do we turn people from this, idea of bread and circuses to realizing that, what we are a part of is something so much greater than TikTok?
Such a great question. First of all, look around. You're in the midst of what's supposed to be the continuous lockdowns nationwide, and you have people showing up to go hear someone talk about the Declaration and take questions for an hour and a half. There's a sense of urgency in this country still, and we're far away from an election. That's a good thing. The attendance tonight, the enthusiasm, the energy, the commitment, there's people that care. We need more people. And unfortunately, the greatest reason involvement's going to increase is because the left is implementing such awful ideas and immoral ideas that people are going to start to wake up. I wish that wasn't the case. I wish there did not have to be unneeded pain and suffering for people to wake up. But here's the charge. It's a perfect segue, thank you, for every person in this room. Have tonight be the beginning of your activism. Have tonight be a time when you say, you know what, I am going to do more. Maybe you're going to run for precinct committeeman. You know that half of precinct committee positions nationwide are vacant? I guarantee some people in this room don't even know what a precinct committee position is. A precinct committee position is just saying, I'm going to be responsible for my neighborhood to go and vote. So go do at least that. Go register new voters. Go start a Turning Point USA group like our amazing activists up here. Maybe the adults in the room, you're busy, you're raising kids, then support your local Turning Point USA group. Have them over for dinner, mentor them. And then here's what we need to do more than ever. We need to be relentless and have perseverance, and then be specific of what success looks like. That's something that I think that we're missing, because people say, I don't have hope. The lack of hope, I believe, is a lack of clarity in our future destination. We need to have a sense of purpose again. And here's the good thing. I think we're finally finding it. I think the conservative movement is less about opposition and more about creation of something new and exciting. Like I mentioned, I want to have flourishing families again in this country. I want to see the population rate go up, not go down, because we are on the verge of a population collapse in this country. We're having 500,000 less children this year than last year. I want our children to be so excited about Thomas Jefferson and George Washington that their parents have to calm them down at the dinner table. I want our children to love America more than their parents love America. We are on the right side of this, and there is a relentless metaphorical bombing campaign that tries to make you care less day by day, to engage in apathy. This is why we're here today. This is why I've gone from Dallas to Midland to Boise to Oklahoma City to Springfield to Kentucky. We're traveling the country because I want to look people in the eyes, because this Zoom stuff drives me nuts, quite honestly. It just does. We're human beings. We're social creatures. We need to be around each other. And I'm here looking in your eyes telling you that if you commit yourself to activism and to action and improving the welfare of the community around you, we are going to win. We are on the right side of this. We have truth. We have the facts. We have the evidence. We have reason. They have emotions. That's it. And we need to get better at organizing and more specific of what our agenda is. So here's a couple action items, and then we'll wrap. In this local area, for young people, all the young people here, care deeply about the education of your children. Please, I love the homeschooling parents that are here. We need to get deeper into our history and better at defending America. We have to get better at making the case for America. I wish that wasn't the case, but we do. Number two, we have to be more serious about the indoctrination of our children and intervening earlier. Do not leave it up to some government bureaucrat to teach your children about what's happening in our country. Number three, we need to get our churches more active on these issues. We got to get pastors speaking out. We got to get our local fellowships to take moral stances on these issues, and you guys that attend these churches can do that. And then the final thing I'll say is this, which is something I kind of talk about, is try to learn something new every single day. We need the conservative movement to know our stuff better than the left. This is something we try to do on our podcast every single day. Totally shameless self-promotion. If everyone would subscribe to the Charlie Kirk Show, I would deeply appreciate it. And we would beat Rachel Maddow in the charts by tomorrow morning. If every single person watching online and here did that, we'd deeply appreciate it. We do 2 podcasts a day, and we go deep. You guys listen to our podcasts. Anyone listen to our podcast here? Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. Well, I'm selling to the choir, so there we go. But go deep into those ideas. Know why you believe what you believe. You're going to be more informed and more prepared for action. I'll close with this. They want you to give up. If we don't give up, victory is inevitable. If we give up, they take over everything. We are at a moment right now. That's such an exciting moment to be involved in this, right? This is where everything you do matters more. Every conversation you have matters more. An audience like this gives me hope. The traction we have at Turning Point USA and what we're doing gives me hope. And so make this the starting point of the new conservative movement that puts what is right first, and your action will be amplified through everything. Never give up, never give in. We'll be celebrating together very soon. I'm telling you right now, our best days are ahead. God bless you guys. Thank you so much.